Welcome once again to the review of The Evolving Analyst. And in this book, there are 45 articles. And one of those articles has been written by our guest today, Federico Ortega. And the title of his story in the book is Creating Value from Large Language Models. It fits in the artificial intelligence section of the book. And really, Federico's article tries to explore how business analysts add value by improving the quality of decision making in very complex and uncertain environments. So, welcome, Federico.
Thank you very much, Marcus.
You're welcome. And I want to also mention just very quickly Federico is head of ways of working for the Americas at the company that he works for. So, he's got a large amount of knowledge that he can help share with us today. First question for this afternoon. How do you think that BAs can frame large language model conversations with leaders?
There's a key aspect there, Marcus, and it deals with earning trust and being seen as an individual who can contribute to both the fact of the matter progress, the business we're trying to put together, as well as being able to contribute to the work that other roles are leading. So the the mission there is not to win arguments or win debates. That's not what we're there for. It's rather being able to make trade-offs very visible and relate those trade-offs to the alternatives that are at hand. Boris Cherny, who is credited with the creation of Claude Code, insists on this, and he himself is, I guess, a product owner that is also very technical. As you're providing that visibility, you need to keep in mind the evolution of the tooling. It's something that leaders usually lose track of because of all the changes that are happening every day. If you're aware of those changes, you need to be able to relate them in terms of how they're allowing you to do a more effective work. And you should also confirm how your process is shifting. When you work with LLMs, the different roles may need a reshuffling. You may not need a subject matter expert so early on, but you will need them further on to make the confirmations. And leaders should also be aware that the outputs that are being produced by these large language models need validation. So there may be reductions in some parts of the process, but you may need to iterate in other parts of the process. You need to make all that visible to leaders.
Superb. Now, how do you help teams really distinguish between certainty, that certainty created by process, and genuinely understand and the genuine understanding of the actual business problem?
Large language models don't really understand anything from reality. They're probabilistical engines that relate words to each other. So you need to make sure that there is an underlying process that is respected. Teams need to be aware of the phases that are being conducted and avoid solutioning early on. Surprisingly enough, large language models are very prone to solutioning. So a good way of avoiding that is making sure that you've got a solid mapping of the business problem. That after that mapping, you conduct also some research to add on to that mapping, and that you generate user journey flows and platform confirmations before you jump into solution. That way, certainty is created as you're also working with the technical restrictions of large language models. You need to keep in mind reflections where you take one input from one model and compare it to one output from one model and compare it to the output from another model, as well as iterating with experts because hallucinations, despite being much less frequent nowadays, can still occur. Um, you also need to be very aware of how you're setting the context and keep in mind the spots or places where you bring the client in to validate your progress. So in the end, it is translated to using large language models to improve an existing process that generates that
Mm,
certainty.
okay. I like this idea of creating this user journey before you create the solution. You have to understand that context. I think that's crucially important. Um,
An item there is also the understanding of the value stream mapping.
okay,
Uh,
great.
if you don't have the bottlenecks in place, you may be providing value where it shouldn't be provided, and that
Got
just
you.
invalidates the whole effort.
And when you talk about value stream mapping, it reminds me business architecture. It's almost like this BA is kind of extending into solution design, solution delivery, this kind of thing, which is good. Which is good. It helps to expand that skill set as well. So thanks for bringing that up. Awesome. So you think if a senior BA, and there are quite a few senior BAs out there, if the senior BA wants to influence at the enterprise level now, what capabilities do you think uh, they should they should strengthen first, and why?
They should be aware on how vibe coding works, because vibe coding can bring prototypes to life very quickly, and stakeholders appreciate using prototypes to confirm intentions or to confirm purposes instead of reading through documents. Elena Verna from Lovable makes that point very intensely. And after all, Lovable is in the business of producing prototypes very quickly. They do it internally as well. There's another item which is understanding what context engineering means and how it's set for platforms. It's being associated to engineering because you need to take very specific steps and protocols to build it. And tools are always releasing new ways of putting that together. ChatGPT released the creation of GPTs for projects a long time ago, but other platforms are as well putting these contexts at play. The most recent version is the one that is being used by models like SpecKit or BMAD, where the agents help you build that context. And from that context, you end up building the feature sets, the epic sets, and the whole way in which the applications or what you're building evolves. Um, and that leads to agent assisted coding, which is like the latest step in all that process. A year ago, this was all very undefined. You had to create your own agents, you had to create your own sets of prompts. But right now, this is very accessible. And things like Claude Code or elements like Visual Studio Code integrate these elements. You need to be aware of how models respond to your intent. So if you want to make specifications, it makes sense to use something like Gemini 3. It's less expensive. But if you're going to jump into coding for a specific prototype, you can use something like Claude Code, which is more expensive, but maybe more precise.
I like this idea of vibe coding. I think it's important to point out that you're right. You've taken time, I don't know, maybe 5 days, maybe a week to do something. Now you can do it in a day, maybe half a day, maybe an hour. And you're creating those epics, those user stories, those use cases, maybe even those features with this LLM, which has just, I think it's just taken business analysis or analysis in general just way up. It's just scaled it at an incredible speed. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next few months, in the next couple of years, because things are just changing dramatically almost daily.
It also changes the way in which you collaborate with technical teams because you're contributing on the same code base.
Yeah.
That may sound a bit foreign. You're still creating documents, but you're insisting on creating a base that can be considered as policy as code. Because as you're generating these requirements inside the platform they're working on, you're working on constraints and restrictions that are going to be formal for the work that teams are going to be doing in the future. So handoffs are no longer being done in a session where we're explaining a document. These handoffs can be done inside the code itself. And if you're an analyst that's equipped with these tools, you'll be able to co-create with the teams not only more quickly, but more precisely.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really intriguing time for analysts, for BAs in general. It hasn't been more interesting than this. I think the idea of being able to having multiple people working on that one app, like you mentioned, so you see those changes up front instead of having to pass this change over to someone else and they pass it over to someone else and so on. We're all working in the same venue, the same area on that one application. I've seen it done. I've worked with companies that have done it as well, and I think it's incredible. Everyone's on the same page. You're using the same language. You have the same understanding at the same time, and I think it really helps to clarify a lot of things that couldn't have been clarified as quickly in the past. I think so.
It also helps traceability. When you want to confirm a change, you're looking at the whole code repos, so to speak. So
Mhm.
you're looking at that universe from a single touch point. and then
Yes.
the agents tell you where things are changing, where things need to be traced, and just that just eases off the process.
Single source of information. Yeah,
There you go.
beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Federico. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. Once again, Federico's got an article in the Involving Analyst. Pick it up if you want. It's on Amazon Canada, Amazon USA, Amazon UK, Amazon Australia, all over the world. So thanks once again, Federico, for being on the show and for giving us a really, really nicely articulated overview, I think, of business analysis from the LNM perspective.
Sure thing, Marcus.
Awesome. Great. Take care.